Does deciding on structure for your family sound totally foreign to you? Or you just don't know where to start?
Let's get into that.
Hey, I'm Andrea Warnock.
I'm Nathan Warnock.
And you're listening to Family Friday on the Marriage by Design podcast. Family Friday is a time where we talk about God's design for family, how we structure our family, and just some things that we've learned along the way. And this month we're talking about family structure.
That's right. So last week we talked about what is family structure and why is it important. Mm-hmm. This week we're going to talk about, okay, as you think about a structure for your family, how do you even go about figuring out what should be a part of that structure? How do you come to a family structure that works for your family? And how do you go about translating that into things that you're going to implement on a daily or a weekly or monthly basis within your home?
Mm-hmm. That's great. And then, so today we're talking specifically about making those decisions.
Creating your structure.
How to create your structure. So Nathan and I, we agree on a lot of, which is providential really, but we agree on a lot of pillars for our family. For us coming up with how are we going to, what are we really going to be as a family, and how does that look? Wasn't too difficult because we didn't disagree on too many things, which was awesome and providential. But it was a couple years ago that we decided, we really need to write those things down. We really need to make a decision on what is our family going to stand for and stand on, and how are we going to use those kind of pillars to then branch off into the decisions that we're making and our priorities and how we train up our children and that sort of thing. So we decided to sit down and really come up with a list of who we are, what we stand on, that sort of thing. And so that's what we want to talk about. And we found that to be so important for us to be on the same page, for our kids to understand the pages that we're on and why we train them in a certain way or discipline them in a certain way.
Totally. Yeah, that's right. So really what we want to talk about today is kind of a walkthrough of here's how we think about that, here's how we did it, and hopefully put you on a path where you can do that for your own family. Right. Or maybe you have a young family now, or maybe you don't even have a family yet. These first few steps, the things that we talk about today, really don't depend on you having a family at all.
Yep.
It's something that you can do if you're a young couple with no kids, and just go through and talk about, man, what are we going to be all about as a family? And you know what? If you're a couple that doesn't have children and isn't ever going to have children for one reason or another, that doesn't mean that you can't go through these first steps yourselves as well, because these really don't specifically have to do with children. They have to do with your family, right? Which for you is you and your spouse. This is what we're going to be all about as a couple, in your case. In the same way, you maybe have kids that are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 24, right? And you may be going, we have never had this. Is it too late? And the answer is no, it's not too late. It would be great for you to be able to sit down and say, hey, from this moment forward, we're explicitly going to be about these things as a family. And some of these steps that we kind of are going to walk through might change a little bit in the way that they look if you're doing it with older children. But we'll talk through those things as we get there. So what we want to talk about today is really broken up into 3 steps. It is brainstorming the pillars of your family, and we'll talk about what we mean by pillars here in a minute. Brainstorming the pillars of your family, deciding upon the pillars of your family, and then translating those pillars into actionable structure within your home.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the three things: brainstorming the pillars, deciding explicitly on the pillars, and then translating those pillars into actionable things that you can do in your home.
Right.
So maybe you kick off the first one and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so the first one is just kind of brainstorming what your family is about. And I think kind of doing this in two ways. I think it's good for you to brainstorm on your own. Mm-hmm. Take some time away from your spouse to just think about, so you're thinking about, what are we about? What's important to us, or to me, if you're doing this on your own at first. What's important to me? What are we standing on as a family? What do I think what do I think should be a pillar of our family? What's so important? And then also brainstorming that together, so you can come with your individual ideas, but then when you put your noggins together, a lot of times you're going to be thinking about and talking about some other ideas too. This is a great time together. Is a great time to have really great communication or dialogue. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, listen to this month's Marriage Mondays about communication and dialogue.
Yep, that's good. Babe,
because,
killing it. Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. Because being able to talk back and forth about, I think that, our priorities should be this, and this, and then your spouse maybe says, I disagree. And rather than getting mad or whatever, you can say, all right, tell me more about that. Where's that come from? And then also sharing your heart. So it's a great chance to, number one, be introspective about mm-hmm. why do I think some of these are really important or not? And then also to be able to share those things and communicate and dialogue that well.
Totally. Yeah, so let's step back a second and talk about what these pillars are. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of times, we've been trained in our capitalist America to think about, well, every business needs to have a business plan and a mission statement. Mm. And
this is not
so
that.
We can translate that sometimes to, okay, as a family, we should have a mission statement. And I know there are a lot of people that teach that, even from a Christian perspective, that, hey, you should have a mission statement as a family. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. We don't necessarily have one, short statement that follows all the rules and mission statements for our home. Right. But what we do have is a list of, these are the things that are really important to us as a family. Mm-hmm. And they're stated as, we do this, we act this way. If you have ever been a part of a church or part of a lot of businesses, and you've looked into a business and you go to their website or church and click the About Us, oftentimes you can find a list of, these are the code of the church or the pillar of the church, mm-hmm. right? We believe X, we believe Y, right? As a company, we do this, we do that, right. We don't do this. Those are really what we're talking about when we talk about pillars, right? As you come together and decide on the pillars for your family, it is action statements that say, we are this, we believe this, we do this, mm-hmm. right? I personally like to put them in the positive, right? As opposed to,
do not.
We don't like lying, right? It's no, we tell the truth, right? Those kinds of statements.
Right.
Those are really what we're talking about pillars. So as you can see from those are not things like, we don't believe in spanking. We do believe in spanking. That's more of a translation of maybe some of those pillars into mm-hmm. the actionable items type idea that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But what you are doing is saying from a 10,000 foot level, and really that maybe is a better way of thinking about this.
Right.
Really,
yes.
What we're talking about today is going
Non-specific.
from 10,000 level and then funneling down to translating into actionable items.
Right.
That's
the
20 foot level.
Right. Yeah, it gets more specific, but that's not really what's on our list. It's not like specific discipline is not like listed on on
Right.
our list, you know. But it's anyway. I think you'll get a better idea as we talk about it.
Right.
But that was a good explanation.
Right. So what does this look like? You kind of gave some ideas of, hey, here's some important parts of it, but what does this look like as far as in your quiet time as you think about that? What are you thinking about?
So I think when we talked about this, some of the things I was thinking about are priorities, and I think I mentioned that. What were some of the things that I thought about? Because some of them didn't make the list. But I thought about. I kind of started with like us, and then outside. So it's important that we treat others well, and that we're not only about ourselves. So that was some of what I was thinking about when I was kind of doing that on my own. I don't know, what were some of the things that you...
How much of your time were you spending thinking about where you came from?
Oh, probably a lot.
Yeah, that
was
my
background.
The question.
Sure, yeah. How I was raised significantly, played a significant role.
Sure.
In how I think about things and what's important to me. In my family growing up, telling the truth was hugely important, and I'm sure that is for most families, but it's like that seemed to be a really, really, really high priority, to the point of like, don't say you're going to do something and then not follow through. Follow through is very important, because that was a part of telling the truth, not lying. All that sort of thing was really high priority. So I'm a person who puts big stock in telling the truth, in not ever lying about anything, and in being true to my word, and making sure that I'm not saying I'm going to do something if I'm not sure I can do it. So yeah, those sorts of things definitely play into what I'm thinking about as far as pillars.
Yeah.
Because it's helped to mold me as a person. And so, some of those things from growing up that were high importance, did I agree with them? Did I not? Did I find that those help to shape me in a good or bad way? And then should I include that in our family?
Yeah, would you say the brainstorming part, particularly when you come together and start talking through these things, and practically, here's what I would say. We've talked so much on this channel about being intentional. This is definitely, there's an assumption throughout this conversation tonight that you're being intentional about doing this, right? I mean, it's probably not going to go well if you're trying to like trick your spouse into creating structure for your family, right? I mean, if you invite them out on a nice date and then you show up and go, hey, I've been brainstorming structure for our family, here's what I got, that's probably not going to go great. What I would recommend is that you talk together and say, hey, I think we should start talking about what the pillars of our family really are, for the purpose of firming up the structure of our home, and then decide on a time, right? How about we take the next week and spend some time just ourselves thinking about what are the things, and pick a number, right? There's no magic, but what are the 12 things that I really want our family to be about? And spend time apart thinking about those things, but have a set time to come together. Hey, next Friday night, we're going to sit down after the kids go to bed, or, we're going to go out on a date if you have the freedom to do that. Tell me what that's like. And we're going to sit down and just talk to each other about what we have.
Right.
And the really amazing thing about this, Dave, and tell me if you agree with this, is this brainstorming part of it is really less about really your family and really more about learning each other.
Yeah. It's a great way to learn more about your spouse and what they think is important,
Right.
and how their growing up and background influenced them,
Right.
and how they think about that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
it's a huge opportunity for that.
right. One of the pillar verses of this channel is 1 Peter 3:7, where Peter commands us, live with your spouse with understanding. And this is a huge piece of that, where we can spend time as a couple really getting to know, like, man, I didn't know that was important to you.
Yeah.
I didn't know you had this in your background. And we can get on the same page with those things.
Yeah.
So that's the brainstorming piece of it. You start apart, think about what are those pillars that are really important to me, write those things down, and then come together as a couple and just maybe even go back and forth and say, well, man, if I had 12 things that our family, or 15 or 10 or 20 or whatever it is, that I was going to be all about as a family, here's what those statements would be. And again, I would encourage you to put them down as action statements.
Right.
Like, we are this.
Yeah.
So you've brainstormed those things.
Yeah.
You've come together as a couple. And a lot of times these two, the brainstorming and the deciding, are very close together time-wise, right? So you've brainstormed them, you've come together, you've talked through some of them, you've been other-focused, right? And put away the defense attorney, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's definitely going to be something where, you know, your spouse says, I want to be all about this, and you're going to go, okay, she's saying that because I'm not good at that, right? Don't do that. But you've come together, you've brainstormed, you've talked for understanding, you've dialogued together about these things. Now you're going to decide, here's the things that our family is going to be all about. Yep. What does that look like? Yeah,
so deciding is kind of just, I'm sure some of your lists are going to be, some things on your list are going to be the same, so that's great. And then just seeing, you know, maybe you want to include everything. Maybe you both think, hey, what the other person had to say and what we thought together was all important, and we're going to include all of that. That's cool. Maybe some you're like, that doesn't really make sense for us, whatever. So you take the time to make those decisions on what makes the final cut. And then the important thing is to write it down. Don't just have this great conversation and this time of communicating and thinking and talking about backgrounds and all that, and then you're like, oh yeah, those were great, those 15 things were great, and then you don't write it down.
Right, because then 2 weeks later you're going to go,
what was that list?
Do you remember? I feel like...
Yeah. So take the time to write it down. And ours is written down on a piece of paper that has been torn on accident, and it's not anything pretty. It's in Nathan's handwriting, so it's definitely not pretty. It's mine is not either, though. It's not anything like formal. It was just written down. Yeah, are you gonna grab it?
Sure.
It was just written down. And so, but it's something that we can go back to and look at and talk about. Yep, that's it. It's been torn because it, you know, whatever, the kids got to it, I think.
Right.
But it's just on a piece of paper. So.
And there's like scratch out marks on it from, you know, when we started writing something, we were like,
no,
that's not worded correctly.
Yeah. Yep. I would love to put this on canvas and have it like cool. Big. We have the stairs that go from our upstairs to our downstairs or to our main level. Really, it's just the 6 of us that see it, and there's a huge wall space. And I've talked about having that on a huge canvas and then just having it written there. Because again, it's like pretty much just the 6 of us that see that wall space.
Yeah, and anyway. Everybody would see it when they come down from, you know, in the morning or whatever.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Or the zillion times that we come upstairs and go downstairs. But you know, maybe you want to do something like that. Maybe you just want to have it on a piece of paper. Totally fine. Just make sure it's written down so that you can go back to that often if you want.
Right, which is your point about revisiting things often is an important one that we'll come back to, you know, here in a moment. So for me, one of the pieces about deciding is having a manageable number of things too.
Yeah.
And I think the thing for you guys to talk about as you're going through and deciding is, because there's going to be, if you both come up with a list of 20 things, they're probably all going to be good, right? Where you're looking at that and you're going, well, I don't disagree with a single one of those things, but you do have to have some conversation about what are the most important things to our family, because if you have 60 things that are important to you as a family and you're going to create structure for your home around all 60 of those things, your kids are going to feel like they're growing up in a prison.
Well, and if you have 60 things that are important, then really nothing's important. That's the way it ends up
easily
playing
feel
out.
that way.
It feels like, well,
that's
then
right.
Just nothing's important.
That's right. And the problem is, for kids, it gets frustrating because everything they do is micromanaged to some degree, because there's this huge list of things that are really important to our family. So, our list has 13 things on it. There's no magic number. It could be 10, it could be 6.
13?
Right?
We chose 13?
Yeah, lucky 13 for ours. And we'll read those here in a minute so we can kind of talk through them, with you guys and just give you an example of what we had. But, yeah, I totally agree. Write it down. And you mentioned something right at the end before I jumped in about revisiting it. Talk about that a little bit more.
Right. So I think it's really good to revisit that often. It's one of those things where if you don't revisit it often, you'll kind of forget about it. And maybe just, and likely then in the goings on of life, things just happen and your priorities get out of whack, and then you look at this and you're like, well, we have in there that being transparent with each other isn't, whatever is important, but I'm not really, because life is just too busy lately, and I'm not making that a priority, and I've kind of forgotten about it, really.
Right.
So it's a good thing to go back to remember this is what we say is important, and so is it? Do we still need to have that on there? Are we still going to go by that? And if it is, then how do we live our lives like that?
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And another reason why this is really important to have it written down is for something we're actually going to talk about next week when we talk about establishing. But one thing about establishing structure in your home is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so, to be able to revisit these things regularly helps you as the leaders of your home and your family to go, okay, have we gotten lax with regards to this thing? And maybe the question needs to be, hey, is that thing still something that's really important to us? Right? Because as you grow and mature as an individual and as a couple and as a family, you may look at some of those pillars that you had on your list and go, I don't know that this is really as important to us as a family as I thought it was.
Yeah, that's great.
And then, you know what? Then it shouldn't be on your list. And go back and revisit that list and cross things off and add new things on. And as your family grows and changes, your pillars may grow and change, and that's okay.
And you might have to get new canvas.
Right.
Yikes.
Danger.
Okay, so then what I'm thinking with this revisit too is talk to your kids about this. If they're at an age, of course, that they can understand, but talk to your kids about it and revisit it with them somewhat as well. And it's a great conversation starter too of, here's what we have down. What do you think? What do you think I can improve on as a parent? Which of these do you think that I could get better at? And
man,
kids are great to be honest. A lot of times with those sorts of questions. So,
and along that same line, even if you've never done this before and you have older children, this could be a really cool way to unify your family by allowing some of your older kids to be involved in some of the decision-making process, right? Maybe have them come up with a brainstorm list where they say, hey, what do you think are the really important things for our family? Be a really cool way to get some insight into the thought process of some of your older children. Now, they need to understand the decision is ultimately yours because the Lord's given you the directive to lead and run the family.
Mhm.
The husband's looking at you, right? But both of you as a unit, as parents. So, they need to understand that at the end of the day, you may look at some of their list and go, you know what, that's not something that at the end of the day I want our family to be about. But allowing them to be a part of that process, I think, can be a really cool,
Definitely.
a really cool part of that.
Yeah.
And even if you put this structure in before you have kids or when your kids are young, as they get older, because hopefully when you revisit this list, it's not just the two of you, right? Hopefully you're revisiting it with your family and saying, hey, kids, here's the things that we're all about.
Yep.
All right, so here are the things that we brainstormed and decided on that we were going to be all about as a family. So here's what we got. We believe in the Lordship of Christ. We know the Word of God. We stand firm in the Word of God. We walk boldly, pray boldly, and live fearlessly. We value family and pour into our family first. We live intentionally. We think before we speak, and we speak honestly. We stand up right where the rip is. We stand up for those who are hurting and or weak.
Yeah.
We're transparent with each other and others. We do not underestimate the value of today. We think of the good when we think of the good in others, we tell them. We laugh a lot, and we bring laughter to others, because if God didn't love laughter, he wouldn't have created farts. We live in grace in our relationship with others, and a part of that, we forgive quickly and unconditionally. Those are the 13 things that we came up with for our family. And honestly, if we're speaking honestly, you and I probably have not done as good a job as we should have of revisiting those and talking through those. And we definitely have not done as good of a job as we should have with sitting down with our kids and talking through those things with them. I mean, we've talked through this list with Jackson, but at that time when we talked through it with him, Ryan was too young to really have been involved in that. So it's probably time for us to sit down and let them maybe be involved in talking through some of these as well. So so thanks for listening in while we figure our own things out.
This is the point that I feel like we try to make sometimes is we don't have this figured out. We're not doing this podcast because we've arrived or we have it all figured out. We're walking along in life just like everyone else.
Right.
Flawed and tripping up sometimes and not doing the best in some areas. So we are the same as everyone else.
Right.
We just happen to talk about a lot of stuff.
Right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. So, as we talk about this list, let's move into really what I think can be the most difficult part of this process, which is translating. As you heard our list, you're probably thinking like, wow, those are like super broad things. And you're right. Yeah. And that is the point. I mean, those are the things that we want to stand for as a family. I won't even say that we do, because I think a lot of times we fail in these things. Yeah. Excuse me, but these are the things. Up, huh? That's right. These are the things we want to stand for as a family. Yeah. So the difficulty comes in, how do we take these things from this list and focus them down to actionable things that we can do on a daily, minute by minute, weekly, whatever basis with our family? That's the structure part, right? You have to go from the big broad pillars to right down to the structure that you put into your family. So babe, maybe give just your thoughts on funneling things down from these pillars into life. And then what we're going to do is just go through a few of ours and talk about things that we've put into place in our family that we believe connects to those things. And certainly you may listen to some of them and go, that doesn't connect at all, and you guys are weirdos. And you're welcome to put that in the comments below as well.
Sure. So like live intentionally. That sounds super great, and it sounds like such a like a poster saying,
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we do think about that a lot, and we talk about that a lot in our family, specifically between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
And there are very few things that we do, very few things that make it into our schedule that aren't very intentional. And I don't mean to say that we overthink everything that we do, but it's intentional. Like, yeah, this is what we're about, so it fits in. Or, yeah, this is what we're about, but this would upset our priority pyramid, or the priorities that we have. So this
Sure.
can't fit in.
Right.
You can do a lot of good, but maybe it's not what you should. We talk about this is good, but it's not for us, sort of a thing.
Sure.
And so there are definitely things that we talk about that it's like, yeah, this is good, or this is great, but it's not for us. And that fits into the intentionality and the priorities. And it also goes to the Lordship of Christ and just giving that all up to the Lord and saying, what do you really have for us? And what are we really to be about? So yeah, like the live intentionally is just the example that I thought of. Like that is something that is always at the front of our brains, with things that we're saying to our kids and to each other, and things that we're doing, and the thoughts that we have. Yeah I would say that's just one of those things that it's like always on our brains.
Right. So how do you, for a couple that's out there that's at this stage and they're going, okay, we've got this list of pillars written down, we're good to go on that. How do you go about practically looking at that list and translating that into some of these things? How would you suggest doing that?
Well, some of it's going to be just by living life, and things that come up. So I'm thinking of a funny example. Let me see your list. Kind of a funny example, but there's think before we speak and speak honestly. Okay, so we are going to be about the truth, right? Well, what about Santa? That's not something that you may be thinking about when you're making your list, but it's something that's going to probably come up if you have kids. So if that comes up because you have children, well, how do we speak honestly? But also Santa. So that for us came in several conversations. I grew up, again, it came from backgrounds.
Sure.
I grew up where we never believed in Santa. My parents just never went with the Santa thing. I always knew there was no Santa, but we had a Santa. Man, we should do a disclaimer before this episode of don't let your kids watch this or listen to this
if you're watching this, she's clearly wrong.
I'm so wrong. I don't even know what I'm talking about. No, my family, we just never did the Santa thing.
Sure.
Except that some of the gifts said from Santa, but we all knew it's from mom and dad or grandma or whatever. Okay, Nathan.
What about my family, dude?
Nathan grew up in a home where they lied to their children every year and said that there's a Santa. No, wow. No, I'm kidding.
They're probably watching this video.
I know, that's
You're
why
not
I
getting
said that.
Christmas presents this year.
Darn it. I mean, no, he grew up in a home where they did the Santa thing. So they would talk about Santa, and I think he would bake cookies for him, and they would even leave a bell, I think, right? You should be telling me this.
They'd ring the sleigh bells.
At night.
Mm-hmm.
So they went with it, the whole thing, and they lied to their children. I
don't know what to tell you. We love Santa.
Yeah, they do, and it's sweet memories for Nathan, which is fun.
Right.
So we had complete difference of opinion on how we handle Santa with our kids, because I came from my background, he came from his background, and we both think that we're right, and we both think we had great Christmases because of what we believed. And so we had to talk about, well, how do we fit that in with what we say we're about as a family? We speak honestly and we think before we speak. So we ended up really going with, we're just gonna be more kind of not telling our kids that there's a Santa, but really more like inquisitive of them. Oh,
yeah.
What do you think? And
right.
And like when they talk about it, be just kind of ask them questions and listen to them talk.
Right. Which actually, this is a good example too of something that is important to us, but that did not make our pillars, as will happen, when you guys have lists too. And that's, we want to raise children that think for themselves critically about issues around them. And for me, one of the cool things about Santa and the Tooth Fairy and these other, kind of
and we do the
cultural things that are just part of America and in the postmodern era that we live in, is I think these things provide good opportunities for us to encourage our kids to think for themselves. And you may totally disagree with me, and I'm totally cool with that. But for me, when Jackson comes and says, "Hey, Dad, is Santa real?" And I can go to him and go, "Well, what do you think about Santa?" He goes, "Well, I don't think he's real." Well, okay, then how do the presents get under the tree? Well, I think that's you and Mom. Well, why would Mom and I buy a whole bunch of presents for you on just a random day of the year? Right? I mean, and of course Christmas isn't a random day of the year, but you get, and so pretty soon, after 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of me questioning him, he goes, "Yeah, you're right, Santa must be real." Right? And I didn't say a word. I just asked questions. Right? And then he goes off and thinks about it, and he comes back and goes, "No way, Santa's real." Mm-hmm. Right? We have a glass cover on our fireplace. How would he get through that? Well, maybe he could rearrange the room. And
haven't you ever seen the movie Santa Claus?
Right. I mean, so see, there's questions being asked. And at no point am I telling him, "Jackson, Santa's real, get lost." Right? Or, "No, Santa's not real. That's ridiculous. You should go tell all your friends at school they're morons." Right? I mean, at no point do either of those things happen. You just ask questions. And of course now, he's 10 now. And so he's come to the place where he's like, "Dad, I don't think Santa's real." And I'll give him a hard time and say, "Well, man, what if you don't get any presents this year?" And now he's gotten to the point where he's just like, "Hey, Dad, you're dumb. Santa's not real. Go away."
He knows.
Right?
But so we've played it out with our oldest, right?
Right.
And we found that he's not hurt.
No.
That we kind of played along with it. He never feels like we lied to him.
And he figured it out.
And he figured it out, and he thinks it's kind of cool that he figured it out, and he thinks it's fun. So
right. And he's now gotten to the place where we can reinforce, we think before we speak, and we speak honestly with regards to his siblings. Because now we can talk about, "Hey, when Ryan asks you if Santa's real, what are you going to tell her?" Right? And we can talk through some of those things and relate it back to, this is one of the pillars that we have as a family.
Yep.
So let's just pop through a couple of these, babe, and then we'll close it out for the day.
Yep.
So we know the Word of God. How as we looked at that as a couple, how do we translate that into a family discipline and structure?
One of them is a choice that we have made to do Awana, which is an organization that is a great organization. A lot of churches around the country have an Awana program at their church, and it's for kids, and they meet together once a week and have this time where they do games and a chapel service and some fun things. But then a huge part of their program is kids learning scripture verses.
Yeah.
And if I had a book, I would show you. But they start each year with this book that's just chock full of verses that they're memorizing throughout the whole year. And they end up memorizing, I think this last year, Jackson memorized 40 or so just from Awana. So we are kind of all memorizing those along with him. Now, this year, Ryan's old enough too, so she'll be in Awana as well, and she'll have her own book, and we'll memorize those along with her. So it's sort of a family affair, and so Awana is one of those things that we've chosen to do because it's important. And that scripture memory that they get is so great. And when they're young, their brains are sponges. So he gets a lot of scripture memory, and subsequently as a family, we do too.
Yeah.
So that's one way that it's filtered in. We've also gone through a book called 100 Verses Every Christian Should Know. And we've memorized we haven't memorized all of them, but a lot of them, or almost all of them, because they're really great verses for presenting the gospel. They're great verses for just times of trouble and that sort of thing, or other times. So we've chosen to memorize a lot of those, and so we've made choices to, in different ways, memorize the Word of God, and we instill that into our children too. So those are some ways that we've kind of filtered that.
Yeah, that's good.
That down.
That's good. How about we walk boldly, pray boldly, and live fearlessly? How are some ways we translate that into our
Well, we don't
structure?
do that 100% of the time.
But no, of course not.
We walk boldly, pray boldly, and live fearlessly. I'll give you an example. Today, Jackson had to go to the dentist because he had an issue with one of his teeth, and he was really nervous about it. And I was telling, he was really nervous. And so I was telling him, Jackson, you know what? We're going to go and we're going to get this taken care of, and you're going to feel a lot better. And we don't even know what it's going to entail when we get there. So there's no reason to fear about it. God is not a God of fear. And so this is from the enemy, and we're going to pray about it right now. He and I spent probably 10 minutes in prayer about that, and then which led into quite a few other things that we were praying about too. Baseball and thanking the Lord for certain family members and all that sort of thing.
Me? Do you thank the Lord for me?
Well, I thank the Lord for you, but he was in agreement. Yes.
Great. This is great.
So it was one of those things where somebody in the family had a spirit of fear. We boldly went to the throne about that and said, no more. This is not going to be what you're about. And then prayed boldly about that, and then prayed about other things too. So it comes in with just life circumstances, or there will be something great that happens, and we'll just, hey God, oh my gosh, thank you so much. This is great. Whatever.
And I would even say, practically, like we have intentioned as a couple to not be helicopter parents with our kids.
Yep.
Like for us, that's part of living fearlessly. Like if there's a rock and one of our kids wants to climb it. Like we've sought out opportunities for our kids to go do things that might be scary, or maybe are a little bit beyond their age, maybe are a little bit scary for us as parents, but we've intentionally sought out those opportunities for our kids to go do things that are a little bit scary, but that they are willing to do.
I was thinking about this list today, actually. Ryan is a climber, and she was climbing this structure at a park. There's the monkey bars that you're supposed to go across on with your hands. Well, she wants to get on top of them, and I bet it's 7 feet, 6 or 7 feet in the air, these monkey bars. And she wants to get on top because it's for like an older kid's playground. She wants to get on top of them. And all I said is, Ryan, that's a big drop. It's going to hurt if you fall. So please be really careful. But I'm not getting her down because she'll probably be okay if she falls. But I want her to make those decisions on her own. Now, I wouldn't let my 2-year-old do that.
Right.
But she can climb up there on her own and she can make those decisions on her own. I'm there to guide her and say, that's really high. So just know that if you fall from that, that could hurt really badly.
Right.
And we don't let our kids run amok. I mean, there are things that we stop them from doing.
Sure,
but we do try to allow them to live boldly, make bold decisions, not be fearful. The other side of that, though, is Ryan has started kind of being shy in some ways and saying, Mom, can you come with me to say hi to this person? Or can you come with me to ask Parker if he can play? And I will say, no, Ryan, we're not going to be, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
We're not going to live in fear. You need to go boldly over there.
It's great.
So those are some of the examples.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Let's just do one more and then we'll close it down for the day. How about number 5, we value family and pour into our family first. What are some ways that we have translated that into our family?
A lot of that goes into the schedule, what we're putting in our schedule. I think the biggest thing is we have agreed that it's really important for us to have more nights than not sitting around the dinner table together. So that means at least 4 nights a week. And I will say we've made an exception during baseball, but currently we just have one child playing any kind of sport. So if we have more, then this has got to get figured out in a different way. You know, maybe we have dinner at 4:00, but we have dinner number 1 at 4:00, whatever. But for now, I can make an exception because we just have one child in baseball, and that really heavy baseball period doesn't last long. But as you have more children, that more children in sports, that gets hard. Sure. Anyway, but when it's not that heavy baseball season, 4 nights a week or more, we need to be sitting around the table having dinner together. There may be other people with us, but it's
frequently are.
Yeah, it's important to both of us that we're having family dinner together more than we're not. So that fits in. That is a scheduling thing, and it's sometimes we're not able to do things that we want to do because while they're good, they're not right for us.
Right. And I would say even when we have other people over for our family dinners, it's the same sort of structure, right? Like we're communicating with we're having dialogue, talking with our kids, but we're also asking the guest, right? How was your day? What did you get up to today? What's going on with you this week?
And it's great. It's a great time for our kids to have better table manners because they're maybe thinking about that more, but it's great for them to also learn communication and dialogue.
Totally.
In our real life settings. And respecting. Totally. Another way that we put boots on the ground to this, we value family and pour into our family first, is we have one child who is struggling right now to respect, honor, and be kind to parents and siblings. There's an attitude issue, there's a disrespect issue, somewhat frequently. And we have told this child, until you can show us that you can consistently be kind, be respectful, and be honoring to your family, who should be, your priority, then we can't trust you to be with other people, to play with friends. So at this point, you can't play with friends because we can't trust you to respect, honor, and be kind to them because you're not doing that with your family, and your family is your priority.
Yeah, that's good.
And so that's how that plays out for us with discipline, but also inside of our own family.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, babe. So I hope that gives you guys a little bit of a glimpse into how we've boiled down some of these pillars into actionable things that we do here in our home. If you guys find this to be something of value and you'd like us to go through all of these individually, just let us know, right? Either hit us up on our Facebook page or put it down in the comments below. You can shoot us an email, marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. Certainly this would be something we'd be happy to look into doing, more of, or maybe doing a live event or something like that to just go through these and kind of talk through them with you guys, if that's something that's of interest to you. But otherwise, that kind of gives you an idea of how we boil those things down. So next week we're going to talk about, okay, so we've boiled down our pillars into a list of things that we want to do structure-wise as a family. How do we implement that into our home? And what does that look like? That's what we'll talk about. Then week 4, we're going to do a little bit of Q&A. So if you have questions about brainstorming pillars, about deciding on those pillars, about establishing structure in your home, what do I do in a blended home situation? I have this situation with my kids. How do I handle that? Any of those questions, doesn't matter how specific. You're welcome to be anonymous too. If you want to do that, just tell us when you send it over to us. But love to gather up some of those questions, and we will go through those in week 4, just to kind of share our thoughts on some of the things that you guys are dealing with as you approach this topic. So please get those over to us, and we would be happy to address them here on the show. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Appreciate it. And remember, God's for your family.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.